Hello, everybody. My name is Thomas Fracken. This is the Roundtable Chats podcast, episode 5. I have a very special episode today. I'm interviewing Mr. Rob Campbell. He's a retired Army colonel, husband, father, public speaker, author, and founder of Investing in People Consulting and Coaching LLC. According to his website, his life's core purpose is to make a difference in the lives of others through optimistic leadership. Rob, thanks for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure.
So a question I always like to start is, what are you grateful for?
A handful of things. I'm grateful for the nation that I lived in, having served in other nations and fought in other nations, and have witnessed their struggle up close and personal. I think that freedom is a universal thing across cultures and generations, and it's something that everyone wants. So I'm grateful for the freedom that we have here in the United States, and I appreciate it because I've seen the other side. So very grateful for that. I'm grateful for the family that I have. I've got 2 sons that are grown now, one in college and one off on his own in Utah. Fine young men. Grateful for a wonderful wife that stood by me in a 27-year Army career and helped me lead and care for soldiers and their families. And I guess lastly, but not least, I've got a long list, is I'm grateful for the Army that really gave me what I stole a line from another leader, a opportunity of a lifetime, for a lifetime of opportunity. We've traveled the world and served in a values-based society in the Army, and it was just really, really great for me. It was kind of what I needed. I never knew it, but it was just wonderful. So I'm really grateful for all those things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I just wanted to unpack the freedom piece a bit. In America, with people who've never left the country, what do you think are some of the things they take for granted, living in this country?
Yeah, well, I think they, quite simply, they take that freedom for granted. The fact that they can just get up and go to the store and without the threat of a predatory government picking their pockets. Certainly, we have our own, corruption and things in our own country, but not to the scale of what I have seen in other places. The fact that we live in relative security. Yeah, there's this scare of terrorism and things like that and violence, but, factually, it's very, very small. And so we live in a very safe and secure society. And so I think that that's what a lot of them take for granted. We really, after 9/11, there really wasn't any sacrifice on the part of the nation. This could be turned into a long answer, but after, Pearl Harbor, the nation came together and the nation sacrificed, and women went to factories and they decreased their rubber consumption, things like that, to support the war effort. Well, that same kind of thing should have happened after 9/11, that we all felt that pain, maybe a tax or something levied on the people to be able to go solve this problem. So we all kind of felt that pain. We're all together, but that never happened. General society just kind of went back to the malls and the beaches, and
Right.
a small portion of society, the military, went off and fought the wars and continues to do so. And I don't want to say that as, hey, I blame the American people. I don't. I blame our leaders for not really starting to, kind of set that up. And so I think what you have is people that just take for granted the safety that they live in. And the freedom that they enjoy here.
Right.
So it's kind of natural. I guess, I don't know, how do you fix that? What do you do about that? And maybe it's some sort of national service or giving back. I don't know. I don't have an easy answer to say, okay, what's the remedy for that? Because you just can't. I'm not about just getting a draft set up and requiring everyone to serve. That's not what a free nation does. But I do think that by and large, people do take that for granted. It's easy. I mean, you just become complacent. You become used to a lifestyle, and there it is.
Yeah, absolutely. On the service piece, I'm half French, and I know in France, what I like that they do is they require either 2 years of service in the Army or some long hours of community service for those who don't want to serve. And I'm like, I think both of those are good things, overall. But I also think just traveling in general is incredibly important. I had the privilege, the second guest on my podcast, he was from Zimbabwe. So he was telling me what that was like, to live in. I mean, very different country, right? And he's like, when I was much younger, 5 guys Rob like just invaded my next door neighbor's house that was like a few feet away from me and killed them, right? So I never, when I was like 10 or something, so I never felt safe again, right? So the concept of security in my suburb that I live in Boulder, Colorado, that would just never happen. It's just not a reality, you know? So I can't imagine feeling like afraid every night, you know, like that.
Yeah. No, you're right. It is. And the traveling part to me is you know, it's been really eye-opening. It's really expanded my horizons because I entered into the Army as a very isolated American. You know, we enjoy secure borders, and you know, Mexico and Canada are not going to invade our country.
Right.
And we're, you know, protected by oceans.
Yeah.
Where you look at other places like that, you know, Israel, Iraq, you know, the Middle East, a lot of those nations out there have, you know, very dangerous borders. It's staring them in the face. It's right there. So, yeah, I think that travel and connecting with other cultures and societies is enormously important. And I'd love to see some sort of service requirement. I just think it's a bit of a leap for our nation to be able to dictate that kind of thing. And I'm not saying everyone needs to join the Army or the Marines or the, you know, any of the services. It could be something just on the very, you know, service-oriented government, giving back, you know, helping out in crisis areas and things like that. Because I think you grow and you find yourself in places like that because they force you into very difficult situations. And, you know, you've got to kind of come out of your shell. There's just a lot of goodness there. So.
No, I agree completely. I mean, when I think of my friends who have served, so I had a friend from Korea, and so it's required there 2 years, and then I have a friend of mine who volunteered to serve in the Marines, and it's like, it's so obvious those who've done service like that. I mean, from, of course, the posture, right? Like I heard, like, I mean, it depends maybe what service, but when you join the Army, that's the first thing you learn is the correct posture. How you hold yourself is so important. And that's the first thing you'll notice with anyone who serves when they're back home, you know, how they stand. And then they're just like, two of them were so selfless. I remember, so my friend Patrick, who's a Marine, I met him in the south of France. He was just living there, and he literally took his shirt off his back to help me. You know, it's like I had a bleeding toe and he just took it off and tied it up, like no hesitation. I'm like, no one's ever done that for me. Like, I'm like, if I was like stranded and it was a zombie apocalypse or something, I would want him on my team, like no doubt. Like he'll be the leader. You know, he was so together. You know, so great.
Yeah.
So that's really good.
No, the military does that. I mean, it's all about the greater team and the organization, and we subscribe to a set of values. You know, in my profession, the Army, you know, it was the Army values, loyalty, duty, selfless service, respect, things like that. And it gets ingrained in you. It's almost like it becomes in your DNA. Right. So acts like that, taking your shirt off your back, was very natural to him.
Yes, exactly.
You know, that wasn't something he had to process. It was just immediate.
Yeah, it's just what you do.
Yeah, it's because the Marines do so well at that. It ain't about you, Thomas. It's not about you, Rob. It's about the team, period. And so, you know, whatever you need to do to contribute to that greater team, that's what it is.
That's incredible. Yeah, and I think I touched on this in an earlier episode, but I feel like with my generation, there lacks humility. There's a lot of like, look at what I'm doing. I'm so great, you know, on social media or whatever. And I feel like in the Army and in service, that's something you're taught either directly or indirectly is humility, right? You're just one person in this unit. There's something much more important than yourself, you know? Well, I think that's so important.
It's been my experience in this transition. I just retired in 2016, and so, you know, I did 27 years. It takes a few years to deinstitutionalize. And one of the uncomfortable things in this new environment that I'm in is doing just that, talking about myself, because I run a business. You know, I need to promote myself, but I'm not used to doing that. In the Army, I was just about the team. And all my successes were because of the people that you know, served with me. So for me to get on LinkedIn and talk about myself or promote myself, it's just a very uncomfortable and a strange experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something I wanted to dive into further. That transition from being in the Army, you said, for 27 years and then not. I mean, how jarring was that? I mean, that's something that a lot of people I know struggle with. So
yeah, it's been a journey. In fact, I'm writing my second book about it. The title is Draft, I think. It'll be what I'd like to call it is Hair Growth Experiments and Afternoon Naps, a senior service member's guide to an authentic transition. So it's got a big hook title there,
Right?
right?
It's an original title, yeah.
And growing beards and things like that. But that's what happens to a service member who leaves, because I've been clean cut my entire life.
Right.
My hair never touched my ears, and it did the other night. I woke up screaming, and now I can take an afternoon nap in the woods in my hammock, and it's really cool. But my point is, I want it to be a guide for senior service members that come out with a retirement plan and a pension and have different choices than some of the younger folks might. But also in that book, describe the transition, which is what you asked about and what I have experienced, because it is a journey, and it's one that I'm still on, and there's been some discovery as I've gone through this. A few of the lessons that came out for me, one is it's all about the network. It used to be, in looking for another job, because I need to do something, and I floated a few resumes out and filled out a few applications. It used to be that you filled out an application, and that was really the gist of it.
Right.
Your merit stood on your application and what your qualifications were. And yeah, sure, back in the day, certainly the network was key. Well, today it's everything. It's about who knows you, and that somebody can get your name in. To get past those steps of the resume and the application to get you into an organization. So I didn't do a lot of networking on LinkedIn and Facebook when I was in the service. And as I transitioned out, I had to do a lot more of that. So that was a learning thing for me. I had to kind of get out there. One of the other ones is really putting my ego in a box and, really having to wrestle with that. I'm a full colonel in the Army. I commanded a 5,000 person organization. See those flags up there behind me? Those were all my soldiers, and I commanded all. There was a huge responsibility. I've deployed to combat 3 times. I've seen things and I've handled things that most people can't fathom. Great. So I just need to keep that inside me and shut the hell up about it, because I go to events every now and then, and I sit around and I look and I feel like an alien. I feel like in many ways I was extracted off the planet in 1990 and placed back on the planet in 2016.
Yeah, or you're like frozen in time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know who these people are, and I find myself resentful for, wait a minute, why is this guy or gal up on stage? What are their credentials, and what have they done? Well, they started a business, raised, brought it up to whatever, and then sold it for $1.2 billion. Okay, great. Did they leave a wake of people destroyed people in their wake? I mean, what did they do in terms of leading people? They raised money.
Right.
So it's this whole thing, I never dealt with money in the military. Certainly we had a budget. We had to be good stewards of, government funding. But it was not central to what I was doing. And I find that today in today's society is that it's all about money.
Right.
This guy is a rock star, and he's going to be our keynote speaker because he made millions of dollars.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think he ought to be a rock star and a keynote speaker if he cared for his people, and made better people. That ought to be his credentials. But I get that. The other thing, Thomas, is I commanded a large organization. I'm a CEO. I can operate at the strategic level. I may not know a lot about pharmaceuticals or healthcare or whatever other industry, but those are technical obstacles I have to overcome, and I can do that very easily.
Sure.
So I see myself as a CEO, as a large, corporation executive, where I should be able to step in and do that. Well, we wouldn't allow that in the Army. I wouldn't allow you to come in and take command of a battalion,
right?
Because I don't know you, Thomas. I mean, I'd want to see you perform in leadership scenarios before I would allow you to do that. Even though if you came in with a doctorate degree and has some, really great credentials.
You need experience. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I shouldn't expect the reverse, that society is just going to open doors for me because I'm an Army colonel and a combat veteran. No. Now, I would like. And for all veterans, not just me, better recognition and understanding of what a veteran brings. And I'm working on that space too. But, to stay on the question in terms of the transition, it was really that I discovered I needed to assimilate back to society and not the other way around. And so I had to kind of bottle that up and swallow that bitter pill a little bit and understand that, this is the way the world works. Now, that doesn't mean I come off of my values. You said at the very beginning, I'm placed on this earth to make a difference in the lives of others through optimistic leadership. It's written on a card in my wallet, and that's who I am. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And I can't step away from that. So I'm doing leadership consulting and things like that to get business people and leaders to think in terms of the investment they make in people versus the money they gain in revenue from their business. So those are things that I have discovered in the transition, and just the gross misunderstanding that are in a lot of organizations. One last point, and we can move on to other things. But my wife had went back to work after I retired in 2016 to kind of help with the transition,
Mm-hmm.
giving of herself just like she's always done. Well, she's a school teacher. She has a degree. She got in 1990 as a school teacher, and so she went back into teaching, or attempted to, and so she interviewed in a lot of places. Now, what they saw was a dusty old teaching certificate and a degree from 1990, and a woman who had not been in the teaching profession since 2006,
Right.
when she left to stay at home and care for our children. And so it was a discriminator, so
Sure.
she was compared to others that were coming fresh out of college or had been teachers in other places, and so she was competing with that. What they missed was a woman who came to this organization with a sense of duty and community and teamwork and selflessness and volunteerism, that had leadership skills, that was steeled hard from 27 years of serving by my side, by caring for children when I stepped off for combat, by providing healing remarks to a battalion when we lost soldiers. I mean, these things are what I think are the tangible fuel that drives an organization and what a school would want on its team.
Sure.
But they missed that completely because they were just looking at statements on a resume.
Yeah.
And I suffered the same thing. I'm not SHRM qualified. I don't have the PMP certification or Lean Six Sigma. Those are certifications. I can get those. That's a technical obstacle I have to overcome. What I bring is decades of leadership in the toughest environments you could imagine. I'm a team builder. I gather people and I drive them to excellence. Things like that I think are critical to an organization, which is missing. And so that's the space I'm trying to help fix and fill in organizations. But it's been an experience of mine in this transition.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on what you're saying about your wife, I really struggled with the whole interview process, and I wish they would focus. I mean, of course, your previous experience is very important, but it's like,
Sure.
What value can you provide us today when you start work the first day? Because it's like, you could have the best credentials in the world, but if you have an awful attitude and if you
Yes.
are difficult to work with, it's just not going to work,
Exactly.
And maybe that's a hard thing to calibrate in one interview, someone's personality, but I feel
Sure.
like interviews could do a better job with that. I don't know. The
I agree.
strangest, interview experience I had was with Deloitte, the consulting company, where I had this behavioral interview, but she didn't ask me that many questions about myself. We just more had a conversation. And she kind of convinced me not to join the organization in a subtle way, where she said, look, I joined when I was like 50 or 60. I don't think I would have joined when I was your age. They're kind of looking for a very specific mold of person. So it's like, forget your past experience, your grades or whatever. It's like, if you don't fit into this mold, it's probably not going to work. And they're very connected to fraternities, actually. So it's like a whole thing. So very who and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very challenging. But the value thing is so important. And the other thing, realization, I think I had this a year ago, is it's like just this question I always ask myself is like, how can I help you? How can I serve? And I'll do things for free. So I'm glad you brought like the money aspect thing, because people are really obsessed about money, but pretty much every great opportunity I've had came from me saying, I just want to volunteer. I really don't want to be paid. And it would be shocking how surprised people would be from that, because people my age always expect money. It's like a religion almost.
No, I do the same. It was something I had to overcome too, because I think it's a natural tendency in a lot of us to get paid for what we do, to get something for our investment. But I really kind of had to come to. It wasn't a hard leap, because I did that in the Army. Somebody wanted me to come speak, I did it. I'd just go do these things, and I was getting paid by the government, obviously, but not specifically for those things. So I've spoken in tons of places, and not been paid a dime. And I've gone in and I've consulted and coached numerous people and executives and give them feedback for free. I work with a lot of younger startups that don't have any money, but I want to help them. I want to help them build a good, solid foundation so that they don't fail. Especially if I think they've got a good mission and a good cause, then sign me up. But you're right. I think a lot of us have to think of in terms of, hey, just start doing it for free, and eventually people will pay you.
Yeah, you'll see your value. It's like prove yourself. Yeah, that's why I told a good friend of mine. He started working at this place called the Open Blind Cafe. It's this experience. It's dark, and he just started volunteering first, and now he has a good job. That's just how it works. You just prove yourself, and then it will follow. Another interesting conversation I had, it was this guy who was an investment banker. I think he became a CEO later. But he says he doesn't understand people my age where they come out of college, you're literally on the bottom of the food chain, right? And you want the perfect job with the right hours and the perfect work-life balance. He's like, that's not how it works. It's like for 10 years, it was the biggest grind from like 22 to 32. Like you can't just skip that. That's not how it works. And it's really interesting. So I feel like people my age have become very selective. And to be fair, there's also a lot of opportunities. So I guess they can be more selective, but I think having high expectations is really bad.
Well, I think I wrote an article recently called, where the gist of it was my dad had a job in an insurance company for 40 years straight. My son has a lifestyle. So it's a comparison between the two, and I think your generation is looking for a lifestyle over a job, and I applaud that. I think there's a lot of danger in this labeling of the generation that they're lazy and they're expecting, to be inserted at a very high level and for things to be wonderful. And certainly there is some of that, and I take ownership as a parent of two millennials that I raised in kind of the helicopter parent mode. So I'm seeing the results of that, and I wish maybe I'd push them out a little bit more to give them a little more freedom or put them into tougher positions. But I think the millennial generation, your generation, is going to demand, I know, they're demanding things from the workplace that the workplace ought to deliver. And we need to listen instead of just being, you people are lazy and you don't want to, it's just bad talk. And, at the end of the day, talking with a lot of leadership friends of mine, leadership has not changed. It was the same for my dad as it is for my son. You just take care of your people. You challenge them to grow and develop and, create cool environments for them. And what your generation is looking for versus what my dad is looking for are two different things. So we ought to cater to that. And frankly, I think the workplace will be much better when we get more millennials in there that demand better things from the workplace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree in that it's good to have higher standards, and it's kind of interesting seeing how companies have evolved and everything. And although one good advice I got actually was from Reddit, they're like, when being careful with a work culture, it's like if a company has a bed or if it has like a restaurant in the building itself, like expect to be working there nonstop. Like that's just to kind of keep you there, So be cautious with that. I remember I visited TWC in Washington D.C. and they had a Founding Farmers, this huge brunch place in their basement, and it was like, wow, okay, like they got a lot of money, And it's like unbelievable. But I totally got it. They had an Xbox, they had a TV. It's like, yeah, you're sleeping there pretty much at that point.
Yeah.
Google
the first
has
question you
sleep
asked
pods.
in an interview, do you have beds here?
Yeah, the red flag. Yeah. No, and I think it is important having a work-life balance. I mean, but it's a very tricky thing. I don't know if it's unique in America, kind of this work mentality, because through my parents, and I've always taken school very seriously and had a hard work ethic. But I feel like with some people, they don't have an off switch, right? They don't know how to relax, and that's kind of a bigger issue, And the world has become really competitive too. I mean, that's another factor, but. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's so much easier today to take work home with you and to carry it around in the palm of your hands, and we just have this continuous stream of connectivity that it's just completely different from what it used to be. I remember in the Army traveling, when we went, we call it TDY, it's a temporary duty. So you go somewhere to speak or to do a training exercise or do something. You didn't have a computer. You couldn't take that with you. When you were in a hotel, somebody had to call you on the hotel phone because you didn't have a cell phone. So, you'd you left work at work and you were able to kind of escape. And I think there's a lot of goodness in that. And yeah, it just takes that level of discipline nowadays to be able to shut those things off and close out your life. I've done a lot of reading and really just kind of trying to shape, how my wife and I live our lives here in terms of what we do first thing in the morning. The miracle morning approach, instead of turning the news on, watching something inspiring that really sets the tone for the day, and then disciplining myself not to check email right away and things like that. I don't confess I've got it nailed and it's perfect, because I do find that I'm doing things early in the morning sometimes. But, if you can subscribe to those kind of things and discipline yourself in your life to weed out some of the noise, it can be really powerful. It really can.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, I'm just as susceptible as anyone else. It's like I try to limit the time I use on my phone, and even if I'm using it productively, like to connect and talk to people on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, I still realize I'm like, I've spent a lot of time on this, and it feels so good to just turn it off and be like, oh, I'm back in the world now, And I mean, I was lucky that I don't think I had my first smartphone until I was 17, so at least for most of my childhood, I didn't have that, and I feel pretty blessed for that. That I would just play outside a lot and that kind of thing, because I know that's not really the case a lot for a lot of children nowadays in America. But the phone thing is so tricky. When I was living in France, I had a flip phone, and I loved that. I love that so much, because whenever I used it, it was to connect to someone else in person, right? Just to say, what are you doing, and meet at a cafe. And I want to do a master's at the University of Amsterdam. I love that city, and if I live there, I might invest in a flip phone again, because it was incredibly therapeutic. Yeah, very liberating.
Yeah,
I really liked it.
I know what you mean.
So I just wanted to dive more into your background and your life story.
Sure.
I mean, you said a lot about the transition now, but more like in the early days, what got you into the Army and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was all about beer, Thomas. As simple as that. So I went to college. My dad was in the reserves in Massachusetts, where I grew up, and I never had any desires to join. I mean, it wasn't. I was a patriot. I loved my country, and I had a lot of respect for the military. But this is mid 1980s. We weren't at war. I mean, there really wasn't anything going on that. So I just never entered my mind. And so I get into college freshman year, and I'm broke, and I'm out of beer money. And I see these posters on the wall where you get these huge bonuses from the Massachusetts Army National Guard, and they help you pay for your tuition. And I was an independent person. I wanted to contribute to my own education. And so it attracted me. I said, all right, well, this would be a good part-time job as I go off after college and get a job in business, because that's what my degree was in. And so I signed up. I went off to basic training summer of 87, and it's like, this is kind of cool. And then ROTC came onto my campus, which I just kind of stumbled upon. That was extra money, So again, it was about the money, and I signed on for that. The guy was like, "Hey, man, this isn't about money," and I realized that over time. But I started doing ROTC, which was to make me an officer, and I really enjoyed the challenge and the leadership, and it's just something about it. And so, okay, I want to do this. This is what I want to do full time. And so that's where it all started. And then I got commissioned in 1989 and went on full time active duty in 1990. And the rest is history. So I just kind of started on that path. And, I never really had a grand plan. It was never like, all right, I'm going to make colonel, and we're going to have 2 kids. And it was just one assignment after the next. Even in the Army in my career, I thought a few times, well, maybe I'll hang it up here, and we'll transition out onto something else, because I've always been fascinated, intrigued about the private sector and getting out and doing things like I had seen some of my friends do. But maybe I wasn't smart enough or just motivated enough to do that. I just kind of stuck around. But I was lucky. I really I did very well in the Army. To make colonel and to command a brigade is enormously competitive. And
I can only imagine.
Yeah. I feel very blessed and fortunate to have been selected for those things and do that. So, my wife and I were high school sweethearts. We always had the desire to travel and get out and see the world. We know we didn't want to grow up in Massachusetts the rest of our life. And so, the Army sent us to places like Hawaii and Alaska and Germany and Pacific Northwest and the South, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is how we found this place I'm living in now. And so Yeah, it's been great. We've really enjoyed it. Just one assignment after the next, travel with the kids, grow the kids, and do what we need to do. So I do it all over again.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. Yeah, a lot of people, they get to your age and they have a lot of regret, So I'm glad, you're very confident with what you did.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious more what ROTC was like, because I have a few friends who did that at GW, and they would never tell me too many details about it, but I always had a lot of respect for them. Especially there's this woman who is like half my height, and she would do everything that the men do, and all that, and I love that. I mean, just a badass woman. But yeah, what was ROTC like? Yeah.
Well, the purpose of ROTC is to take civilians and put civilians into the military. What the academies do when you join an academy like West Point or the Citadel, things like that, you're in the military. I mean, you're now full time. While you may not be assessed as a full time active duty service member, you're on a somewhat, essentially a military installation doing those things permanently. What ROTC brings is that private sector, the civilian into the force that has, that represents society, because the military is a subset of society. We change and alter ourselves based off of societal trends, like the focus now on women in more professions. Well, the military has done that. Now you've got women in the infantry, in the Army, which I think is fantastic. And so we have changed to adapt to those things. And that's what ROTC kind of helps you do and get into that. It's a slow start in ROTC. You can be an ROTC scholarship. You can compete for those in high school and get assigned that. And then the Army will take you on full time afterwards. And so you go through that. But in ROTC, I mean, you spend a preponderance of your time on your, typical studies, whatever degree you select, and then you take ROTC courses throughout the 4 years of school, and then at the end of that, you get commissioned. In the summertime, in between school, you go off to different training exercises and certification training to ensure that you can lead, and then you come back from those things, and you graduate, or you stair step through different levels, like MS2, 3, 4. MS4 is like the fourth year of the program, just before you get commissioned as a lieutenant. ROTC does a lot in terms of showing you the military culture, all the customs and traditions, the rank structure and how you march and all the basic things that soldiers get as they go through basic training. It gives military history. It talks about leadership, and then puts ROTC cadets through leadership exercises so they can, the cadre can watch them perform and confirm that, yes, under stress of combat, they can perform, they can do it. They've shown the adaptability and the ability to lead, and it trains them and coaches them through that process and gets them to that spot where, they get to that final certification. We can make this person an officer. Some go in full time, some go into the reserves. You've got a choice at the end there. And depending on the needs of the Army, it's hard to get in sometimes to active duty because they only need so many officers. I found that in the early 90s, the Army didn't need a lot of lieutenants. It was downsizing, and so I fought my way in and got selected for active duty. But not all decide to do that. So that's kind of the gist of ROTC. It's like another college course, but certainly with an end state in mind, and that is being commissioned as an officer in whatever service it might be.
Yeah, no, that's really fantastic. I was just thinking. I study behavioral economics, and the founder of it, Daniel Kahneman, how he got his start when he was my age was he was sent to Israel to psychologically analyze future leaders in the Israeli army. And he would look for unique, very different kind of counterintuitive characteristics, and he was much more accurate in pinpointing future effective leaders versus non-effective. And he didn't look at typical traits. It seemed like the big thing to look for is when an army or when a unit of people were really struggling with some assignment, and it's like, how did people adapt to that stress? And what's like, would you blame other people? Would you take accountability for what you're doing? How would you act really to your teammates in adversity? And that was kind of a good metric. I remember one of my favorite TED Talks is by Jocko. I think he has a podcast, and he was a leader in the Navy SEALs. That's his thing. His message is all about accountability. taking
Yeah,
responsibility
yeah,
for everything.
ownership.
Yeah, ownership, right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, I've seen it. It is powerful. Yeah, I don't know. I was asked recently, are leaders born, or are they made? And I confess I don't necessarily have a clear answer to this. I think as I reflect on my childhood, I always wanted to be the guy that made the decisions, and I always wanted things kind of to go the way I envisioned them. Now, part of that was my selfish tendencies growing up, which I had to shed, coming into the force. But I also think there was a stream of leadership desire to be the guy out front, to be the one to say, follow me. So I think there was some there. Now, was I born with that? I don't know. I don't know the science behind any of that stuff. It just worked out. I'm an extrovert. I think that facilitates, my success in the Army, because I get energy being around people and interacting with people. My wife's an introvert, she can do it. She's eloquent. She's wonderful at it, but she's exhausted afterwards, so
right. Yeah,
it's different. Yeah. And it's a whole other study of whether introverts can be good leaders or not. They absolutely can.
Yeah.
But it's just different for them in terms of how they lead and the way they operate. So, yeah, fascinating study on whether they're born or made. And certainly the Army made me a better leader, by thrusting me into those experiences, starting with ROTC and then all the way through my career. I grew and expanded and learned, and it made a huge investment in leadership. And so, I got through those gates, and the Army blessed off and said, yep, this guy can do it. And then, gave me those commands along the way.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, on that subject, whether leaders are born or made, something that comes to mind to me is like this psychological test, like the Big Five personality. And one of the biggest one I think that could be conducive to someone being a good leader is assertiveness. And some people are just not assertive. And I think clinical psychologists like Jordan Peterson, the Toronto professor, he does assertiveness training for women so they can negotiate wages and things like that.
Yep.
And if you are just less assertive, right, you often will be taken advantage of by people,
Sure.
And so assertiveness, I think, is a really important quality, and some people are just, I think, born very assertive, and and that can be good or bad, but I think that can then be maybe crafted into a great leader.
Yeah.
But there's just humans.
You're talking about weaknesses in people, and so I have weaknesses as a leader, and I commanded a brigade in combat, and so I obviously succeeded, but I have attention deficit disorder. I've never been diagnosed formally. My son has, and I see a lot of the same behaviors in him that I experienced and that I still do. I have a hard time getting started with something, really hard time. I miss small details. I have a great sense of humor. I'm from Massachusetts, and I bring that sarcasm and wit with me as part of my culture, but that doesn't always fit very well in a very serious profession like the Army.
Right.
But that's a weakness of mine. I default to that sense of humor when I'm less confident about a topic or uncomfortable, right? And so I get over that by surrounding myself with people that can protect me from myself. People that can pick up small details, and people that can whisper in my ear and say, hey, you're being, your sense of humor is starting to rear its ugly head, or your ego, or whatever that is.
You need to tell them that. Yeah.
Right. So if you've got somebody that lacks that assertiveness, it doesn't mean they can't lead.
Right.
They just have to be more conscious of it, and then get assistance from people that can be assertive when they need to.
Right.
And then navigate through those things. Self-awareness is huge, and I think that's what you really got to take into mind, because there is no perfect leader out there. Every one of us has our flaws, and it's just knowing those that makes you a great leader.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I'm wondering, like, for our listeners, how can you work on your self-awareness? How can someone improve that? Because I agree, it's incredibly important.
There's lots of tests you can take, and I think 360 assessments are huge. I did a couple of those in the Army where I said, okay, this is how I see myself. And then I compared it with how others saw me, and you find the mismatches there, and then you really look at those things and pull the mirror up and look at yourself and say, okay, what am I missing? What is it that I'm not seeing here? Instead of there's no way. I'm always, I'm not a bad leader. I'm like, you can't be that way.
No.
You've got to really take those things to heart and consider them and ponder them, and then, keep those in your conscious mind as you go forward and lead in different things. And so I had a great mentor of mine described 3 people. Now, this is at the 25-year mark of my career, right? I'm still growing as a leader. I'm still growing as a leader today,
Right.
even outside the Army, as I lead in different scenarios. And he described 3 people. The mule, that's the person that can do a ton of work. You can just load their pack and their desk with a ton of stuff, and they can crank through it all. Their heads down typically, and they're just cranking away. The closer, that's the person that puts the ribbon on it, sets it on cruise control, gets the project and the effort moving, gets it out the gate and gets it going. And then the visionary wants to get on a whiteboard, do some hand wave stuff, no details, just long-term big thoughts. I'm a visionary. That's where I like to be. I've been all 3 in my career because I've been forced to be. But I default to the visionary. It's where I like to be. So because of that, I don't get things done in an organization. I'll just sit in a meeting and talk vision. Well, people want to know, okay, when does this start? Right? And yeah, they may not crank out a ton of work, me personally. So I've got to have people around me that balance me out in terms of those things and where I like to operate. And so, it was something I discovered as a brigade commander. I wish I had had that earlier in my career, and known that, because I had the opportunity to select people to be around me, close to me, to help run the organization. And knowing that would have been very, very beneficial.
Yeah, on that idea, like visionaries, and I learned about like the dichotomy. It's like, so there's the big idea people, and those are very detail oriented. And if you look at a lot of companies, it was partners, and you have like an extrovert and introvert, big ideas, details, whether it's like Howard Schultz and the person he co-founded Starbucks with, or it's Bill Gates with Steve Allen, Steve Jobs with Steve Wozniak. You have to have both. Sometimes a person can have it all. Maybe Elon Musk. I don't know. He didn't really have a partner, but he's definitely an outlier. But he still has a whole team. That's taking care of the details. He's definitely, I think, a visionary. But I think it's so important to know who you are, what category you fall in, what are your blind spots, and then, like you said, like fill in the gaps with other people around you. Something I personally always struggled with was asking for help and really in working with other people. I used to always be very independent, kind of a lone wolf type. And as soon as I started working with other people, but also being very selective with who I work with. Like in school, I always had a bad taste in my mouth with group projects because you're just assigned with anyone. And often you would find a free rider or someone lazy. But once I started choosing people who I would work with to do different projects, like the newest thing I'm doing is I'm creating an app, and I found a co-founder who he's totally the detail-oriented guy. He'll actually make it happen. He'll program it, and he's a biomedical engineer. Like, he's awesome, right? So he can do that, whereas I'll do the marketing. I had the idea and sell it and talk to people. I'm more the extrovert, And it's so great having someone like that because we can just fill in each other's blind spots, and it could turn into something great. But really knowing your blind spots. And also the new idea I've been thinking about is like who you surround yourself with is so incredibly important. Like, it doesn't just change your personality. Like, it will change who you are fundamentally, who you hang out with. So I'm curious with the Army. I mean, that's a great case study right there because you're with guys all the time, right? I mean, you were not alone that often, correct? I mean, you're always with somebody. So how did that, do you think, shape you? I mean, it must have had a profound influence.
Yeah. No, great question. I mean, you become like the 5 people you hang out with most.
Yeah.
That's a huge influence in your life. And there's a lot of truth to that. And, when you look at who people hang out with and, like high school influences, like my sons and who they chose to hang out with influence them greatly. Sometimes bad, sometimes better.
Right.
In the Army, there were a lot of like individuals. We all served for the kind of the same reason and desired the same things. I found that, I was never really an academic as a younger officer. I graduated with a 2.6. I barely get into the Army from my academics. I had to fight my way in. It wasn't my academics that got me there. It was my leadership, I guess, that I was strong in that sense, and I was physically fit enough to get in. And so that's what got me in. And so in the Army, I was surrounded by, scholars. These guys were, ROTC scholarship people, valedictorians of their high school grad, West Point selectees and West Point officers, and just very, very smart people that I had to really kind of keep pace with and rise, up my game to be able to operate in those circles. And I did. I bypassed many of them along the way because I brought in my strengths in leadership and connecting with people, and then raised my intellect level because of those people that I hung around with. I talk about one of the things I'm grateful for is the values-based society that I grew up in, and I didn't realize that, I guess, more formally until later in my life when my sons were older, and so they used to hear me come home every day talking about selfless service and how somebody did something today that was just selfish and not about the team, and how where the decisions I made was always about the Army and what it needed, and it was never about me personally. And so they saw that, and that got into them. And so those are the kind of people that hung around with in the Army, and that we were just all about how can we make this better for the team? How can, we help our higher level commander solve his problems? Team was just always about that. And so I was always surrounded with people like that, and people that were smarter than me, even if they were a subordinate to me, that had just some incredible level of intellect or had different combat experiences that I could learn from. And so I think that kind of answers your question in terms of who it was I was around and the influence it had. But that was a forcing function, or it was forced upon me. It wasn't like I picked those societies. I entered into the Army and discovered, oh my God, I better get smart here because I'm around some pretty smart people.
It's like a survival thing, yeah.
Yeah, and I better get physically fit because I'm around some really physically fit people and some demanding, jobs. So I better up my game. So it did that for me. Had I chose another profession that didn't demand those things, then I'd become someone else.
Yeah, you talking about that, it reminds me of a Charles Darwin quote. I can't phrase it perfectly, I'll paraphrase it, but it's something like, it's not the strongest or the smartest that survive, it's those who can best adapt to change, right? And I think you embody that very well, right? You're totally adaptable. And what I've noticed, I'm only 23, but what I've noticed is being able to adapt is such a key asset. I mean, it's just so important. It's almost pretty much everything. I mean, it's just so important. And,
people grow. I was around people that desired growth and wanted to expand physically, mentally, intellectually, and all those things. And that's how my wife and I are. I see other people that don't. They get very comfortable where they're at, and they stay there, and that's it. They don't grow. They just do the same old things, watch the same TV show, do the same behaviors every day. It doesn't make them bad people. It's just different, and I desired that growth. In my Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTP.
Okay.
In that, I desire education. I like education. One of the greatest questions that I was asked in my transition was, if you could wake up tomorrow and money wasn't an issue and you could do anything, what would that be?
Right.
And that really, the answer to that ought to be very telling for someone, because if what you do for work is not aligned with that answer, then you've got problems.
Absolutely.
A friend of mine said, his grandfather told him, he said, if you love what you do, you'll never have to work a day in your life. But to go back, I got off track here a little bit, but to live out that passion, that's key for me. And so my wife and I always desired growth. And if I could get up and do anything I wanted, I'd write. I love to write. And I'd go back to school.
Right.
I really enjoy sitting in front of somebody that has dedicated their life to a certain discipline and curriculum, listening to them and learning from them. Regardless of the topic, I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah.
So I desire growth, and I was around people that desired the same, and so we always grew and developed.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very similar. I do love learning. I mean, that's something I notice in myself, just objectively looking at my behavior and what I do day to day, and it's 6 or 7 different levels of intellectual stimulation. Like if I'm not reading, then I'm watching some academic video. If I'm not doing that, I'm having some conversation. If I'm not doing that, And it's the question of money was no object. It's I do want to learn about everything. I'll go, I finally found something I can go deep in that's interdisciplinary that I'm satisfied with, which is neuroeconomics. That's what I want to do a master's in, which is neuroscience, psychology, econ, studying decision making, why we do what we do. And the neuroscience thing I think is great because I think finally satisfies my curiosity. The human brain's the most complicated object in the universe, so I can just go deep in that and just keep going, right? And maybe make a discovery. But I think the breadth component is really important. And I like what you said about listening to someone who's like the expert on a subject and just kind of absorbing that. That's why I love so much about college. I was very privileged to go to GW. They had really good professors in their econ department. I studied economics. And even yesterday at the research conference I went to, the professors there were really interesting. It was focused on political science, which I don't know much about. So I really learned a lot, and then I could offer kind of an economic perspective on some things, a psychological perspective on some things. But I realize those are the people I admire, are these professors who are very committed to their craft. But really that extends to anyone who really dedicates themselves, right, to something and really puts their whole energy and body and mind into, And so I think it's incredible that you've been serving for 27 years and you really committed to that. And I would say transition really well into the real world between the book you've written, the book you're writing, and everything else. What was it like, I guess, because I've always wanted to be an author. What was it like writing your first book? Like, that must have been very challenging and quite a journey.
Yeah, great question. So, again, never the grand plan, I never said, I'm going to retire and write a book. I've always desired to write, but, I had a very demanding profession that didn't really give me that space. Or maybe you could fault myself. I didn't carve out that space to do more of it. But I always desired to do it. And, I had a few writing experiences in the military because of, courses and classes I went to. But when I retired, I started moving out towards, the corporate route. I was going to go right into a job and, start pulling in money somewhere. But I just said, I need a break after 27 demanding years. And so I did. I took that time off. I just said, all right, I need, at least maybe half a year, maybe a year. And so I retired in the fall of 16 and had thought about writing. I'd done some articles and submitted a few things. It never really got far. And I just got to thinking about, my leadership approach in brigade command, specifically in an approach I took to that, which really had some great results. And I said, I think I need to share that now because businesses need this too and could learn a lot from what I did, both good and bad. And so I was talking to somebody that had written a book that really inspired me just to get started, start typing it, get going. And so I did. I drafted out an outline, because I was told focus on the outline. You get that done, and the rest is easy. The book can write itself. But what I discovered was, I wrote the outline, I was very loyal to it, and then I proceeded to ignore it when I wrote the book. It just got off on tangents. And there were days I'd finish chapters and read them. I'm like, what are you talking about, Campbell? What on earth? And so it was a roller coaster of great days of writing, bad days of writing, getting into ruts where I couldn't get past a paragraph.
Right.
But it was just about writing, getting it done, putting it on paper, not worrying about spell checks or formats or all that, because I knew I'd get someone to help me package it all up.
Right. Just get it out there,
get it done. Get the meat of it, put the meat on the bone. And so that's what I did. And it was about 2.5, 3 months of writing. People are amazed. I said that really that fast? Like, I had nothing else to do. My wife went to work and it was me and the cats at the house. And, cats take care of themselves. So I was typing away every day. Yeah, just hammering away at it and getting it done and packaging up and doing the research and rereading and retyping. And I probably rewrote chapters 3 or 4 times. But I got it to that sweet spot where I could look at it and say, yep, that's you. I could see a leader picking this up and say, yep, I got something out of that.
Yeah.
And then putting things into the book that are practical. Do these 3 steps.
Right.
Here's a template for how you might go with it. Here's my story of what I experienced. And here's what I screwed up. So it's just all of that, telling that story in the book and then offering practical steps and things that I really got it to a sweet spot. Wasn't perfect, and it's still not a perfect book, but there's really a lot of value there. And then the strange part, when it was all done, I was like, okay, now what? because I didn't know anything about the publishing journey and how you get across those humps. And well, that's where the network came in, right? I connected with a few people that I knew, officers like me that retired and written, and I said, okay, how do you do this? Well, they connected me to my publisher, Silvertree Publishing. Kate and then Kathy, my writer coach, kind of really helped me get this thing packaged up finally. And then got it published, got the ISB, and all the things that needed to happen to get it done. I had to pay for that. Writing a book and being an author is an affair of the heart. You're not going to make millions off of it. But it brought me a lot of pleasure, and it really did. So I got help from that publisher to get this thing packaged up and put together because I really wanted it to be an A-plus product. And there it was. And so the longest time was, from when I was finished writing to getting it actually published, which was October, because I finished writing it late May, early June, and spent the time doing the editing and getting it packaged up and all the things that needed to be done, and had to get on my publisher's timeline. I finally got it on the shelves in October of 17. And so there you have it. That was the journey. So it was neat. But my advice to people that want to write is get a good outline done, figure out what it looks like. Don't just start hammering, some gibberish. Have a plan that, takes you from start to finish, and then just start writing. Don't worry about the other stuff. Who's going to publish? Where am I going to market this? What store is it going to be in? Just write.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. With your process, it was reminding me of the horror writer Stephen King a little bit. He's been kind of known for his meticulous style, right? Some writers are very loose; they just write when they are inspired, right? Or it's just it's hard for them to do a strict 4 or 5 hours a day or however much time. But Stephen King would do 6 pages every day, no matter what, and that's how he's been able to produce so many books, right? He's one of the most prolific authors. And there's this great discussion at a lecture with George R. R. Martin, the writer of Game of Thrones, and Stephen King. And George R. R. Martin turned to Stephen King and he's like, how the fuck do you do that? How do you write so much? And if the author of Game of Thrones is telling you that, which is also a monumental achievement, that's really saying something, right? It's like Stephen King is people just see him as a horror guy, but he's a really good writer. I really like his writing, and he's very disciplined. So I feel like the training you had in the Army was kind of very useful then for writing, because you do have to be disciplined. There's no one saying you're your own boss, and
Well, I'm stubborn. That can be that. It is one of my faults because I get stuck on something and I can't get off of it. Right. And I think it's got something to do with my ADD. It can really, it's going to kill me one of these days. I'm sure of it. But it helped me in terms of writing because I just would let nothing stop me. I got on this thing and I said, no, this is going to get done. And when you commit to doing that and you tell a few people and you get a few paragraphs knocked out, a few chapters maybe, then it becomes, okay, I could not face myself. I couldn't look myself in the mirror if I just stopped cold turkey and said, yeah, I'm going to do this some other time. Right. I couldn't do it. So I got into it. So and it was, I don't know when that threshold was, but I crossed it. And then it was like, oh no, this is getting done. And this is going on the shelves, period. It's going to happen. So tenacious about it. But that's because of my stubbornness, which helped. I'm just thinking of, we're told, so I read the book by Elizabeth Gilbert, the Eat, Pray, Love lady.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here I am, Mr. Airborne Ranger, reading my wife, God bless her, she told me to get this book called Big Magic. Okay. By Elizabeth Gilbert. It's fantastic. And because what she talks about is being loyal to your creativity. If you're an artist, if you work with clay, if you write, whatever that is, do that. Mm. And she says a lot of people jettison that because of life comes rushing in, right? And so I read that book and it really spoke to me in terms of, my passion in writing, because like I said, writing doesn't bring you money, at least not right away unless you make a killer book. Even with the book I have out now, I'm not making a ton of money off of it, but I get a lot of satisfaction because I created that myself. Well, it was almost as if she was giving me permission to do that. And what she talks about in the book is to carve out that time. She makes the comparison to having an affair. When two adults engage in an affair, they will find time to be with each other, in the hallway, at night, after work, even if life is there, they'll carve out time to do that. And she says, apply that same approach to your craft. Mm. where you can write, if it's 6 pages a day or whatever it is, then do that.
Right.
And do it for no other reason but that you love doing it and it gives you satisfaction. Don't worry about publishers and money and fame, and you might get that, you might not. At the end of the day, it's what makes you happy and fulfilled. And so that's what my writing does for me.
Yeah, and the converse of that, if someone was torturing themselves over a book and they were hating the process and they're just doing it to make money, I mean, what a miserable, few years they just spent or whatever, however long they spent on
it is.
You know?
And that's the human ego that comes into it. And I confess that, oh, hell yeah, I want this book to be a New York Times bestseller.
Sure, yeah.
I really do. I want people to be standing in line to gobble this up and pull it off the shelves. But I don't care. What people ask me a lot is, how's the book doing? And it's doing fantastic. And I'm doing fantastic. And I don't know how many books I've sold. I really don't care.
That's so healthy.
At the end of the day, I don't. I want it to sell a ton. I want everyone to pick it up. I want every leader to have it on their desk. And I hope that I get to that. And I'll continue to beat the drum because I'm proud of the product. But at the end of the day, I just get fulfillment when someone says, yeah, I got a hit on my website just yesterday. Read the book, want you to come speak to our organization. Okay, there it is. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that's what counts.
Yeah, I think really focusing on the micro is so important. Instead of thinking like, how many people have read my book, how many people I've helped. It's like, no, I helped this one person, or this one person read my book and they resonated. And just to not discount how significant that is. One of my biggest inspirations, and I'll actually be meeting him for 15 seconds. He's coming to Denver to speak, but Jordan Peterson, I read his book, 12 Rules for Life. I think now that was like a bestseller, which is interesting because it's not, they say it's a self-help book, but I wouldn't want to put it in that category. It's pretty dense stuff. And he's one of the most intelligent people I know. I've listened to so many of his lectures and read both of his books, but what I like about him, he's a very controversial figure. He got in trouble because he wouldn't call a transgender by their preferred pronoun. What was not known about him is that he's had many transgenders as patients in his clinical psychiatry practice. And he receives like 30,000 letters a year or something by boys, young men saying, hey, I was on a really destructive path and I was going to commit suicide or do something horrible. And then I listened to you speak, or I read your book, and that changed my course. And so he's done it on a macro scale, but what I like about him is that after he speaks, and he's been speaking around the world this year, he'll stay and he'll have a huge line of people want to talk to him, and everyone gets 15 seconds. And so it's a very micro kind of thing, right? But pretty much everyone who goes in line, they say the same thing, which is, hey, you really changed my life, and I just wanted to thank you, right?
Yeah.
So there's no formula for having that level of success that he had by any means, but you can cultivate those micro things. And I to me, it's the greatest feeling in the world to really help someone who's in need, in any way possible. And one of the simplest ways to do that is just to listen to them, right? Listen to their story. And it's amazing how infrequent that happens, I guess. Like, there's some people who all they had to do was just say what was building up inside them or whatever, but they never had anyone to do that with, and it's kind of sad. But to anyone listening, if you want to help people, like, start with listening. It's a great skill.
Absolutely. Sometimes that's all it takes. It's just listening to somebody, and not really offering anything, but just an ear. That's it. And I can appreciate what he does. And, those 15 seconds are going to be a lifetime to people. The fact that they got to do that and get something off their chest, or just get a nugget or two from him, a little tidbit to take with them into their lives, can be huge. It really can. I'm mentoring somebody right now. It's just part of a volunteer program for Wilma Magazine. It's a women's professional magazine in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they have a mentorship program. And I think that term is being thrown around kind of cheaply, and people just going to latch, oh yeah, I'm a mentor. Well, no, you're not. You come in and you just talk, and that's it. You're not coaching, and you're not on that journey with that person. And so I'm mentoring a lady who works in physical therapy that leads a department, and we have great conversations about what she's struggling with. And I tell stories, I say, okay, well, I tried this, and this was my approach, or what you just described to me. Here's what I would do. Give that a shot. So it's like the coaching thing. Hey, here's let's execute play number 3.
Right.
You go onto the field and try that, and then come back and tell me how it went, or I'll watch you or something like that, and coach you through these things. So that means, I get a lot of fulfillment out of that when I see the light bulb go off.
Right.
Or like, oh yeah, okay, I hadn't thought of that. Because I've been down that road. I screwed it up 1,000 times. Learn from me. Because I didn't get it right a bunch of times, but I learned from it and I got better, and so give it a shot.
Yeah, no, I think mentoring is so important. One question I wanted to ask you that I think would be interesting is like, who would you most love to have like a coffee conversation with? Like they can be alive or dead, just anyone you really admired or just would love to pick their brains. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Simon Sinek is the first one that comes to mind.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, what a powerful order. I mean, just the way he puts things, I just embrace. I met Simon Sinek on TED Talks, one night laying in bed before I took command of my brigade and stumbled across his why, how, what video, and it just really spoke to me. And then I've just been listening to his stuff ever since and getting his books. I just love to sit down with him and talk more. He's the first one that really jumps out. I'd like to talk to Elizabeth Gilbert. I really enjoyed, her message in that book, and I have never really. I don't think I've fully explored my own creativity, and maybe given myself full permission on my own creativity. And I just think there's things lying inside of me that haven't been tapped into yet. And maybe this writing was one of them. I just wasn't able to do much of it in my career, but now I can.
Right.
Those kind of things. It'd be neat to talk to her about that just to get a perspective. And, anybody else that I've read, Stanley McChrystal, Team of Teams, and the stuff that he experienced and what he went through. I'm really fascinated by his book. Liz Wiseman wrote a great book called Multipliers. And it talks about how leaders can either be multipliers or diminishers. So if I'm leading you, Thomas, and I would push you into places that would help you grow and expand your capability, because every one of us has capability that remains dormant, untapped. And so she really walks through that as leader. And I just, love to sit and talk with her. Anybody I think that just has dedicated themselves to a certain field or profession that interests me, love to have a cup of coffee and just, chat with them about stuff.
Yeah, I did. I mean, one thing I wanted to add with the Simon Sinek, I mean, I think I heard his TED Talk, The Why, How, What, a long time ago, and I didn't know who had said it, and, it's one of the best TED Talks, but I rediscovered him a year ago and was really listening to his speeches about millennials. And then he just has these, I think what makes his public speaking so powerful is he just has these incredible anecdotes that were incredibly influential to me, and I started doing a similar thing. And I'm like, where does he get these anecdotes? Like, they're so incredible, And one of my favorite ones of his was, I forget which country he was stuck in. I think it was Afghanistan, but I'm not sure. And he got stuck there. The plane he was doing some teaching of leadership, and the plane just didn't take off. There was some issue, and he was stuck there for a few days, and he was terrified, right? And so he became very selfish, and he was just, he's just like, I need to get on the student's plane, and he was being rude, and da-da-da. And then when he stepped out of that, and then he said, how can I help? How can I serve? What small things can I do? What can I clean up? Whatever. And as soon as he did that, it changed that mindset. He felt a lot better physiologically, psychologically, mentally, physically. Right. And it's like, that is so fascinating. And that's so true, I really feel
he's very gifted in terms of the behavioral tendencies of people and the feelings approach to getting people to believe what you believe in and buy your product, and how he taps into that, and just how leaders can be effective and ineffective. And, I do see a lot of myself in what he talks about, and I've seen a lot of leaders that don't do that in organizations for a variety of reasons. So his message just resonates with me very strongly. Yeah. He's just very gifted in terms of how he lays that out, bringing science and bringing stories into the mix. It's just very, very powerful. I'd like to emulate that in my speaking, because I'd like to do some professional speaking and be as gifted as he is.
Right. Yeah, I would love to interview him. I'd love to hear his story behind how he became such a fantastic speaker. He really is probably my favorite public speaker, one of my favorites, because I think what makes him unique is like he doesn't waste a word.
Nope.
And I mean, there are plenty of eloquent speakers, but they can sometimes be boring. Some academics, they don't realize that a tangent they go on is just either people are not going to follow or just don't have the interest. But with Simon, he really carefully chooses examples I think everyone can resonate with, So I think that's really important. And absolutely. His idea, kind of like escaping the self, right, when he was in Afghanistan, I remember I really pity people who are stuck in themselves and so self-absorbed, because I was in Barcelona, I remember, and I'm like, this is an incredible city. The food's incredible, lovely. I was with 3 guys and 10 girls. And I remember one girl on the last morning, we had a late night. That's what you do in Barcelona. They stay up super late. And she's like, I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm going to go off on my own. And I stopped her and I said, we're all tired. We're all hungry. And she was so pissed because no one had ever spoke to her that way. She's kind of spoiled a little bit. But I kind of pitied her, how angry she was that she was hungry and tired. And I'm just oblivious that we all felt the same way, you know? And it was just so bizarre to me to be like, I matter most. You guys, when we're all together, right?
Well, that's where character comes out, and
that's true.
Under extreme hardship like that, when you're tired and hungry, that's when you really start to see people's true colors. And boy, the Army did a lot of that for us. I mean, I had tons of opportunities to act selfishly in situations where I was tired and hungry and all those things. And so, you see it. You see it come out in people. I guess what I like about Simon Sinek is he just comes off very authentic and real.
Yeah.
And that just resonates with me.
Yeah. No, he's very genuine. No, that was a great answer. Yeah. Have you read his books? I've only listened to his speeches, but
I have. So I've got the one. I don't know if I have it on my shelf here. It's that little small one about, and I have read most of his speeches. I haven't read all of his books. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because I get it. I get the message. I don't need to hear much more, but I just love listening to him speak. And I go back and watch his videos every now and then just for inspiration and, for sound bites in my own talks, because I do reference him a lot.
Yeah. No, I think one of my favorite lines of his was he's like, Martin Luther King didn't say I have a plan. He said I have a dream, and I'm like, that's so real. That's so astute.
Yeah, absolutely. I use that all the time in businesses. I just did a vision session 2 weeks ago with a business that I'm consulting, and they're 4 years old and they've grown, probably 3 or 4 times their size. But they're at a plateau right now. It's kind of like they woke up and say, oh my God, what is this? What happened? So I took them back to that moment on the porch when 4 of them were drinking beer and had a great idea about this business that they had, a big idea. And the light bulb went on. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember what we were thinking about and talking about. Well, they didn't codify that in a vision, and get that into the team. And so they've hired a bunch of people that weren't there at that moment, don't understand what this thing is all about and why it was created. And so I'm taking them back to that time. And I'm sure we watched the Simon Sinek video at the beginning of that session, the why, how, what, because I wanted them to see the power of that thought process and get behind that, because I know it's going to be very powerful for them. So it was cool.
Yeah, the why, how, what totally changed my life, and I would not consult, but I would give advice to other students my age, right, who have to sell themselves, their elevator pitch, because I realized I was in the business school and there were almost indoctrinating people to say the same thing. So everyone sounded like a robot, right? It's like, I'm so-and-so, I study so-and-so, I did this internship, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same format. It's kind of boring. And I realized if you start with why, if you say, hi, my name's Thomas, my goal in life is to do this. This is how I plan to do that. This is why. Your company would be a great stepping stone or platform even for that. By doing that, I remember when I went to PwC and saw their founding farmers, we were in a table, there was 8 of us, and we're kind of like the top finance students. And everyone sounded the same, and I went last, and I was so excited to do the why, how, what, elevator pitch, and it totally worked. I totally stood out, and I tell people, be different, I just love this meeting where students would be like, oh, what's the most, encouraging thing or great thing about being a consultant, and then I would be like, what was the last time you like failed miserably and everything went wrong? And they're kind of like shocked at first, and they're like, well, yesterday it went pretty bad, and they're very honest, and they like that.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to hear about successes. They want to hear where you failed so they can learn from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
When I took command of my brigade, and I did this in several places, but the biggest one was I took command of 5,000 soldiers. I went in with I had a vision statement written. I knew what I wanted to do, but I kept that with me.
Right.
Left it on my hard drive. I just went in and talked about what I believed in. What was really important to me. And that was it, because, they didn't need much more than that. But I was just wanted to know where I came from. I was obviously going to have enormous influence on this organization. And so I wanted them to know what it is I believed in, and my why. And so that's what I shared. And then we got together and did a shared vision where we all contributed to it. So it was ours instead of mine. But it was just that different approach to walking in. And the philosophy of it, I got some great advice before I took command. One was, what you want to do in the organization versus what needs to be done. It can be two different things. And so you've got to lend an ear to that in terms of what needs to be done. There were certainly things I wanted to do, but as I got into the team and got integrated and listened to people, I discovered there were some things that needed to be done that weren't necessarily on my mind that had to be done. So, interesting ways to look at it, and different ways to ask questions and frame things that are unconventional, and that's where my comfort zone is. It's just a different set of lenses, a different way to ask a question, and different things. It's still, my name is Rob, and this is what I do. Who cares? My name is Rob, and this is what I believe in. Look at my LinkedIn profile. I'd only changed it just a little while ago. It's because I watched the Simon Sinek video with my friends, and I said, because on my profile I had consultant, speaker, veteran, blah blah. Who cares? There's 1,000 of us out there. Big deal.
Right.
What I have on there now is I believe in investing in people.
Right.
That's what I believe in.
Yeah.
Period. And that's what I believe. It's always my default answer is to put this problem on people's shoulders and then care for them, and they will fix it for you. It's powerful, and so that's what's on my LinkedIn profile. And if I attract people that believe what I believe, then we're in a great place.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can do really exceptional things. Yeah,
yep.
Absolutely. No, similar with my LinkedIn profile, I changed my description where I realized, on LinkedIn, a lot of people's descriptions are very similar. They're just very same structured. So I'm like, screw it. Let's just be direct and be like, these are my 3 goals in life. This is what I'm doing this year. This is, this is my vision, and then this is what I've done, and there's always a gap. And actually, at least another question I like to ask my guests, it's like, this might be strange to ask you at this point in your life, but it's like, where are you now and where do you want to be in 10 years? You've already done so much, but do you have any more goals, for the future? I'm sure you have. You're a very, productive person, but.
Sure. Yeah. Where do I want to go? Well, I would like to expand my consulting and speaking business, and it's certainly a business model where I would like to bring in more income, and enjoy some things in life. I'd love to have a '69 Mustang, and I'd love to do some improvements around the house, and the wife and I want to travel more, and so all that means money, right? And so, I want to do some more of that. In 10 years, we have this conversation. I'd like to be able to tell you that I traveled to X number of countries, and I was able to do some things. But really, the what comes out of that in expanding my business is being able to help more people and to grow my leadership message. I want to take this book and this message to a new heights. I want to, the next version of it's personal, not personnel, because of what I've learned and experienced in the private sector, to help leaders. I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to be able to tell you 10 years from now that, I've helped X number of executives, and I've seen the results of their efforts in their organization where they, grew and improved their people. Certainly. I might pursue a doctorate. I do, like I told you, I love education. If I have the opportunity to go back to school, I might pursue that. I am a guy that likes those achievements and milestones. I've done a lot. I've run marathons. I've written a book, and I've gone through Ranger School. I've been to combat. I get all these, things. Some would think, okay, why don't you just
chill,
buy a nice rocking chair and chill out for a while? So those are goals and aspirations in my life. I'm probably not as disciplined in terms of laying those. Okay, at what point in time do you want to do that? Get to that point and then lay out the milestones associated with that. I'd like to be more disciplined in that respect. But, at the end of the day, Thomas, if I were to pass away tomorrow, I'd be very content in terms of what I've done, who I've helped, and the family that I've raised, and the person that I've been. I don't live with a lot of regrets. I do look back and wish I could have done things better, but, like I've been told from a lot of mentors, look back, but don't stare, look through the windshield and not the rearview mirror, and keep moving forward. And so, I'm at a good place. I still think I need to transition more. I sit around with all these plaques on the wall. This is very career Army focused and what I've done for the last 27 years. 10 years from now, a lot of this will be a bit of a distant memory, and so what are these walls filled with 10 years from now? Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's different. Maybe I don't know what that is, but I'm enjoying the ride. I like what I do. I know what I get passion out of. I'm spreading myself a little too far and wide right now, but it's going to help me niche that down a bit. And so in 10 years, I think I'm speaking to you, from a more mature standpoint in terms of what I've experienced and how I've entered into this next journey of my life. And so far so good. I don't have any major regrets, and I know I'll trip and fall and stumble and crash into walls here or there. And, love to be able to tell you I got 2 Mustangs and I've traveled the world on my motorcycle. Not stuff that I wake up every night and it's like, oh, when am I going to do this? I'll get there eventually. And I want to have fun in the meantime and enjoy my family and this great place that I live. I'm 244 steps from the beach. Not a bad place to be at the age of 50.
What state are you in again?
North Carolina. I live on Topsail Island. It's just north of Wilmington, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. I've been to Wilmington. Yeah.
It's a beautiful part of the country down here. We fell in love when I was at Fort Bragg in the 82nd Airborne Division, and been coming back here religiously every summer. And we said, you know what? Let's do it now. Let's make it home. And not wait till we're 75 and buy our retirement home and live out the rest of our days. Let's do it now.
Yeah, beautiful. And I was just reading recently, I mean, I've noticed I feel like I'm at my best when I'm near water physically. And now there's studies coming out that's like the best thing you can do if you need a vacation or just want to be mentally healthy is to be near water. So you've definitely accomplished that. But I think that's a great note to end on, actually. That's really good advice, for our listeners and everything. And I think being able to be content where you are. I mean, always having ambition and things you want to do, but saying, my life's really good. I mean, I have my family, I have my wife, I'm near the beach. I'm very content, I think.
Yes.
With my life. And
you have to remind yourself of that, of what you have and how good it is. And so if you lose sight of that, you'll be chasing something false. And so stick to that. Find out what your passion is. Wake up every morning and say, you know what? The day ahead is good. I'm going to enjoy this. And then go to bed at night fulfilled. If you can do that, the money will come, fulfillment will come. You'll be healthier for it. That's my advice.
Okay. Well, excellent. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. I mean, this was really good. Thank you.
Sure thing, Thomas. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.